Don't cry for me, Argentina.
In 1978, the British musical had reached a high watermark with Evita. Tim Rice and Andrew Lloyd Webber's partnership helping to bring the West End back into contention with Broadway. But with that relationship coming to an end, the British musical had stalled. By the start of the 80s, Britain was in recession. The West End was facing rising costs and falling audiences. Even American imports were having a tough ride, finding critical acclaim but disappointingly short runs. Not the ideal time, then, for Andrew Lloyd Webber to attempt a musical about his favourite domestic pet.
Everybody thought we were mad to do a show about cats. Everybody thought we were raving mad.
The number of people who asked me with an embarrassed smile on their face, doing a show about pussycats? Really?
Cats are not pussycats in my book. They're street animals, they're earthy, they're athletic, and this is a show that is going to be very much about dance.
Right, now, really pull yourself out. And be surprised to see your own leg.
Britain had never had a successful dance musical. Its strengths were traditionally in singing or acting. By attempting a show that required all three was unprecedented.
It's the sort of show that we're told, sort of at birth, that it's impossible to do in Britain, which is precisely why we're doing it here.
But Lloyd Webber had never had a successful musical without lyricist Tim Rice. And the lyrics for Cats would all come from a collection of poems by the dead poet T.S. Eliot.
It was a musical based on a poetry book that were poems and letters sent by T.S. Eliot to his nephews, nieces and godchildren as little newsletters as such. So how are they going to piece all this together?
While Trevor worked out how to piece the poems into a story, choreographer Gillian Lynn set to work instilling a sense of catness into the cast.
Is everybody here? Is there any rotter hiding behind a seat? I had to teach them how to become a cat, and I had to find how to become a cat myself. Not easy. Not easy to get the muscles to work and to get your hands being paws and thinking different and thinking with your ears and all of that. It was a whole different realm of work. His brow is deep. Hold it there, woman, right?
She really tried to create this unusual cross between ballet, jazz, and this sort of animalistic approach.
It was hideously hard for all of us and thrilling. Macavity, Macavity, there's no one like a stomachache. No one da-da-ba-ba-ba.
Macavity, Macavity, there's no one like Macavity. He's a fiend in feline shape, a monster of depravity.
We really had to sort of build up our stamina. And generally, something would happen.
There were a lot of injuries because it was a very difficult thing to dance. And of course, in the space you had, people were falling over. And it wasn't an easy birth, let's say.
What made Cats all the more challenging was that many of the creative team were entirely unused to the demands of a commercial West End musical.
Nobody in our team had done it before, except for me. Certainly Trevor Nunn hadn't, Gillian Lynn a little bit, but not to the same degree, but the team picked up on it pretty fast.
The combination of money worries, lack of story and exhausting dance rehearsals meant that tempers were often frayed.
Everybody was very tense and confused. There were lots of tantrums went on.
There was a big argument just before the show opened.
Andrew comes running through the auditorium with Cameron not that far behind, screaming, "This is the worst piece of music I've ever written. This show is not going ahead."
It's always a good sign when Andrew withdraws the score. It's happened on every show I've ever done with him.
I thought, well, if they're doubting what's happening and they're producing it, maybe we're in for a disaster here. It did cross my mind.
Throughout all the difficulties, there was one ray of hope. One of Britain's finest post-war actresses had agreed to play the key role of Grisabella. But this being Cats, acting wasn't enough. Judi Dench would also have to sing and dance.
I was rehearsing with Judi Dench, and she went, "You kicked me." And I said, "I didn't, actually." I said, "Are you all right?" She couldn't walk. Well, what had happened is her Achilles tendon had snapped.
So she could no longer do the show, which was terrible for her. I hate to say this, but in some ways a blessing for the show, because it meant that they had to bring in Elaine Paige. And Elaine Paige has a fabulous voice.
Paul Nicholas came up and said to me, "What the hell are you doing in this pile of..." You know, they were all intrigued as to why I had agreed to join the company, because they, I think, were pretty fed up with it.
Elaine stepped in with just 3 days left before previews began. With a world-class singer on board, all they needed now were some lyrics.
They rehearsed me, and I think maybe Friday, Saturday and Sunday. And for 10 previews from that Monday on, I was sang a different lyric every night.
I think Don Black wrote, "Good times, I must wait for the good times."
I did a lyric for it. I think Tim did a lyric. A whole bunch of people did a lyric to that tune of Memory.
Tim Rice wrote "Street lamps and the spaces between them."
I did write a lyric for Memory, and it went into the show for a couple of nights in previews, and then it was taken out and given to a lyricist chosen by the director. The director.
Frustrated with the efforts of the professionals, director Trevor Nunn had written his own set of lyrics, cobbled together from lines of T.S. Eliot.
I showed it to Andrew on the Monday morning, and he said, "That's it." And so it went into the show.
Memory, turn your face to the moonlight. Let your memory lead you. Open up, enter in.
But even with the inclusion of Elaine Paige and Memory, as the show headed precariously to opening night, it was still far from certain that Cats would work.
We went on stage really not knowing whether we were going to be the biggest success or the biggest flop. Whether it was brilliant or laughed at, it would be extreme.
I was sitting in the stalls and I heard the whispering around the theatre as we heard the Cats whisper the first words. I had a chill throughout. I had a tingle because I hadn't experienced anything quite like it before.
The audience were going crazy, and it was elating. It was extraordinary.
Well, I thought now dance has arrived in England. Hallelujah!
I think for the British musical it was utterly pivotal. It absolutely raised the bar as to what the triple threat was, and that you could no longer have actors who sang, dancers who danced, and singers who couldn't do either. You know, everyone had to do everything. And from that point on, you saw the rise and rise of the British performers.